Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Organizational Architecture Strategy. Today's presentation and all of the others that are in this series are presented by Christy Weierbach. She's our Managing Director of Workforce Advisory here at Stanbaugh+Ness. But before I toss it over to her, just a few housekeeping items. You can customize what you're seeing on your screen, of course, by going to the GoToWebinar screen viewer. We do have two different audio options here, the computer audio and the phone audio. We do find that the phone audio is a little bit more reliable as it is not streamed over internet. So if you're having any audio issues, which we hope you don't, you can toggle back and forth between the two. We do have the questions panel open for any questions that you may have during this presentation. Please drop any questions into there as we do not monitor the chat box during the presentation. We will have 3 polling questions just to gauge your participation, and these are especially important if you're looking for that CPE at the ending of the webinar. We will have a handout for download that is in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel for you to download. It is the presentation that Christy is going to work through today. Speaking of CPE, in addition to the 3 polling questions that we need you to answer, please mark that you do need that CPE certificate in the survey, as well as let us know how we did in that survey as well. So without further ado, Christy, they're all yours.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. It's good to see all of you again, or I'm thankful to have you participate in yet another one of our sessions in the Organizational Architecture series. And so this afternoon, my hope is that you will think differently about strategic planning. So this is not going to be a session where we walk through the specific steps or process of strategic planning, but rather what are some of the things that you should be thinking about before you really dig in deep in that planning. Some of the higher level conversations you should be having internally, some of the mindset things that you should be thinking about, and then absolutely it connects right into that strategic planning where you become more operational and tactical in the things that you want to implement, execute on, and so forth. So we will talk at a high level of some of the frameworks that you probably have used or currently use within your organization. And I'm not throwing those out the window, I promise. But hopefully today will just give you an elevated way of looking at what your organization does going forward. Many of you already know who I am. You know how to find my contact information. If this is the first time that you are joining a Stanbaugh+Ness webinar or seeing me present, you definitely can find all of our information out on our website. So feel free to check us out and reach out if you have follow-up questions or comments or thoughts. Today, we're going to focus on identifying the strengths of your business. How do you know what a strength is? What should it be? Maybe what should it not be, etc. Talk about how we then develop strategies that align with those strengths. And then ultimately, what are some ways that we integrate the strategy with the culture? So as we move forward here, we will be accomplishing these key objectives, and hopefully you will leave with at least one golden nugget. Many of you have seen this graphic in the past. So if you have joined the other 2 that we have already conducted in the Organizational Architecture series, this would look very familiar. And for those that have not seen those sessions, I encourage you to go back and take a look at those because it is important because all of these are connected. So as we think about the organizational architecture, these are key components that we need to have working together, right? They're interrelated. They hopefully are smoothly working in your organization. And if not, if one of them becomes a little clunky, well, then we can narrow in and really identify where should we focus some attention to get it back to a better place, to a smoother operational place, etc. And so we did intentionally make the purpose gear the largest because it's important. If we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, then the rest of the stuff isn't going to work as well as it could or should. And so we did then follow with culture, and we did that because of the people component of that. Although you can see that if you work on purpose, strategy, structure, processes, in that order, then ultimately the culture probably will be in the place that you want it to be, assuming that everything else is working smoothly. So as we dig in here today, I just want to refresh your memory that our first session was on purpose, and I have the link right there for you in the presentation. Kaylee will make sure that each of you have a copy of this presentation so that way you can follow that link, go back and rewatch it or see it for the first time. But please go look at that session as well, along with the culture session, because it will give you that larger picture of the whole conversation that we're having in this series of webinars. As a friendly refresh, if you will, purpose. Let's spend a little bit of time on that. I know people probably are using this word loosely. They may also call it mission, which is fine. You can call it whichever one you want, which is more comfortable or would be more received within your organization. But purpose essentially is, why are we doing what we're doing? At the end of the day, we have to understand why we work so hard or why we make the decisions that we do. It really needs to help drive the rest of the decisions that we make along the way as we conduct our business and do those day-to-day tasks or functions within our organization. So as you think about the impact that your organization wants to have and on whom, this is important because it's going to guide the rest of the conversation as we think about strategy. So what problems is your organization looking to solve? Are you trying to provide a service that is different than somebody else or at a different price point or solves a specific niche need, right? And what do you want to be to each human that you touch or that you interact with? A lot of times for nonprofit organizations, this can come pretty easily, right? You're trying to solve an issue, you're committed or rallying around one specific thing like cancer, diabetes, or something like that, that you're trying to have an impact, right? A big splash on. Or, as you think about just some of the other industries out there, whether it's construction or food and beverage or manufacturing, architecture, engineering, there are specific things that you desire to accomplish or have an impact on. And so we have to understand, why are we going to continue to be motivated to tackle that problem, tackle that issue, etc. Because when we're intrinsically motivated, it is more natural and we get more excited, more engaged, more motivated to keep pushing through, especially when times get hard. So let's go ahead and start with our first poll question. You all probably know that we have to do 3 of these in order to be able to offer you the CPE credit. So Kaylee's going to go ahead and pull that up once we get to the 85% mark, and Kaylee's going to share those results with all of you, so that way you can see where your peers are currently at with each question that we have along the way. So we'll do 3 of these. First one here is talking about who facilitates your strategic planning. So do you do that internally? Have you leaned on an outside expert to help facilitate that? Or have you really not done any planning at all? So if y'all could take a moment and go ahead and select one of those options, I would greatly appreciate it so we can get to that 85% mark. We're currently at 78%. There's no right or wrong answer with this question, but I am curious. So I just need 1 or 2 more people. Looks like many of you are handling it internally. And so Kaylee will go ahead and post this out so you can see the specific percentages. We have 71% currently who do it internally. And then we have 24% who do it with an outside expert. And then we also have some that said, we haven't done it, maybe no strategic planning, or it's just not been in a formalized way. So thank you, Kaylee. I appreciate that. Before we move forward, are there any questions that have come into the box? Normally we wait till the end of the session and answer questions, but in our last webinar with Culture, it really worked out well because we had some really good questions to talk through our session. So Kaylee, did you say no?
Nope, nothing yet.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to move forward. So why did I ask that question? Why am I interested to know how you've approached strategic planning in the past? Well, we want to make sure that we avoid repeating the past, especially if it hasn't been effective, right? So just because it's the way we've always done it or because we don't know any other way isn't a good answer, because what I have found, and it's not just with strategic planning, it happens a lot with different initiatives. We sit around a table, maybe for one session, couple sessions, we collaborate, we brainstorm, share ideas, we get all excited, and then what happens? Just like the library image that you see there, we put it on the shelf and that's where it sits. It doesn't get picked up because it essentially gets moved further away on our desk from the highest priority item. We get thrown right back into some of the urgent, important things that the business is demanding. And so before we know it, it's a year later and we look up and we're like, uh-oh, we didn't make the progress that we had hoped, that we were so excited about. And so I want to make sure that you don't repeat the past, especially if you haven't done strategic planning or think about your strategy before, then start now. It's more important than ever, and you're going to see why that is as we move forward here. And if you've done it internally, you're going to see where I might challenge how you have approached it in the past. And then if you use an outside expert, I'm going to question you as to, do you have the right person, right? So I hope that all of you say, yes, we are in a great place. Our strategic planning and our strategy are right where it needs to be. That would be the ideal. But I'm sure there's probably not a unanimous yes to that question or that thought. So anyway, it's okay. You always have the opportunity to make improvement and elevate where you're at. My hope for you is that you will, after today's session, be able to go back to your leadership teams and really identify, verify, implement a strategy that has a meaningful impact. And so we're going to talk about that as we move forward. It's not going to be just an exercise to get off your to-do list to appease the board of directors or whoever that authority is, ownership group, etc., but really something that you can be proud of and at least make progress to be more successful, even if you don't nail it out of the park or get a grand slam this first year, but at least you're making those small changes in the way that you do it to get to a better place. Because the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get, I promise you. So let's do our second poll question here. How far out have you planned? Have you usually looked at the next 1 to 2 years? Have you looked at 3+ years? Or have you really gone pretty far out and said 5+ years, this is what we hope to accomplish? Because then I'd really be interested, and we won't have a poll question for this, but for those who have planned 3+ years, have you ever really followed it to a T? Have you really been in a place where exactly what you thought would happen did happen and expected to happen, and it was a very well planned out process that you followed? And so certainly in the survey that we have you complete at the end, if you want to give me some insights on that, I'm curious because I probably can guess what the answer would be on that. And I'm not trying to be cocky in any way. I'm really not. I'm coming from a true, genuine place here, but we are currently at 78%. So if you'll go ahead and give me a couple more checks there as to where you've planned. And if you don't know, well, then just select one. It's okay. This data is not going to be published in a formal way, so it's not like you're going to skew it in a negative way. It's just really curiosity for me to shape the conversation as we move forward here. So Kaylee, if you want to go ahead. Looks like the audience is pretty much split between the 1 to 2 or 3 to 5 years. Some of you have done 5+ years, and maybe you have to. There are times where it is appropriate to look 5+ years out, especially if you're thinking about ownership, if you're thinking about just some senior leaders that will be retiring and so forth. So that is very critical, especially if those individuals have very strong relationship capital. So if you're in an industry where you have a strong client base, architecture, engineer, etc., if those relationships are closely held within 1 or 2 people in the organization that are going to be stepping away, well then, yeah, you have to strategically think about how do we transition those relationships? What's the impact of that on our organization as we go forward and so forth. So that's where it is appropriate, definitely, to have maybe a longer plan in place. But as far as your day-to-day business, I'm not sure that we can really predict what's going to happen, right? Nobody predicted the last 2 years. We have a couple elections coming, so there's a couple things in there that might impact what happens and what we do and how we do it and so forth. So Kaylee, thank you so much for sharing that. I greatly appreciate it. So when we think about strategy, we think about how your organization is going to choose to provide value to the community it serves, right? So let's take a moment to think about that. What is the value that you're going to provide as an organization to your client base, your customers, the community that you serve? And that's going to be different from one organization to the other. So you might very broadly provide value in the form of the least expensive cost items, right? Or you might provide value by focusing on one specific issue that you want to solve, let's say domestic violence. Or you might provide value by working on a specific type of technological upgrade, right? So you think about parking garages and you think about how technology's been infused. Maybe you're going to focus solely on parking garages and the technology that's being used within those, right? So you can get pretty finite with the value that you provide, or you could be more broad and say, hey, we're going to work on bridges of all sizes, or commercial buildings of all sizes, or residential, etc. So I challenge you to ask your leadership team, is the value that we provide clearly known? Do our customers and our clients truly understand what we offer, right? Do they know the purpose? Do they know the reason we're passionate about what we do? And that value, can they easily find it? So if they're out on the internet looking at your website, do they know what that is? Is it just listed as engineering or construction services? Is it listed as, hey, we manufacture widgets, right? Or do you really define what that is? And could that give somebody a clear indication of why they would want to choose you, right? Some people are drawn to organizations who specialize in certain areas because they know that those organizations are going to have a very deep bench of talent to either help provide the service or make the product. And then as you think about who that person is that's receiving that value, that community, the customers, the clients, who is that? Have you clearly identified who that is? Have you been trying to serve all, or have you been narrowing that down to really be precise as to who you want to provide that value to? And if you've never had these questions come up in your conversations, this is going to be a differentiator for you, because many companies aren't thinking in this way, right? What is the value we provide and who are we providing it to? This will give you an advantage to then really take the operational and the tactical part to a whole new level. When you're precise with that and you really say, why are we doing it and who are we doing it for? That creates a beautiful story moving forward. So as you're thinking about what value are we going to provide and who is it for, what is the value back to us as an organization when we meet our internal standards for performance, right? So we're going to have to uphold a certain level of quality, consistency, reliability with the product or service that we offer, so we can make sure that we always provide something of value to our audience. So what is that value? Do you actually have your processes, your structure, policies in place in a way that you're confident that you know the value is always going to be there for your client base, right? Customer base or audience. And if you can't answer yes to that, well, there's a place to start, to take a deeper look. And that's why we are going to have follow-up sessions to today. We're going to talk about structure. We're going to talk about process to be able to get you to the place where you have your whole organizational architecture in a better place to be more successful in the future. I'm not saying you're not successful today, but how do you become even more successful or be able to have a stronger armor against some of the things that you might face in the future? And then as you think about those internal standards, do people truly understand what that is? I talked with an organization one time and they had a specific word that they said, hey, you know, our employees just aren't upholding the level of artistry that we expect. So we had to go back and make sure that artistry was defined in the way that the principal group truly saw or had a vision for that. And then they had to make sure that it was communicated in a way that the employees would understand what that is, connect their work to that definition to really uphold that standard or that value that they were providing out to their audience. So communication and clarity are critically important, because if our internal teams don't have a true understanding of what the expectation is, how can they perform to the standard that we're looking to achieve, right? It's not their fault. If they don't know, they can't do it. And so if we've done a good enough job of helping them understand what the expectation is, then we're positioned better for them to perform with the highest and best use of their time. So this next slide here is probably familiar to many of you. It is something that many people, whether internally or externally, have embraced along the way. So when you think about strategy, you have to think about, are we going to be more broad, like a Walmart, right? Where we can serve pretty much anybody, and we're going to provide, hopefully, the lowest cost for our products. Now you'll have like dollar stores and things like that, Target, that might challenge and be competitors in that space, but they're really focused in a broad way. Now, if Walmart wanted to narrow, then they might take some products or services off of their listing of the core things that they do, but they still might compete on being the best cost provider, right? And so that's great for that type of organization. But if you're providing something a little more specialized or niche, then you might want to focus on the right-hand side there, and how do you be different? Even though your prices might be more expensive than your neighbor, you want to sell and highlight the value that you provide because you are different. Maybe it's different talent you bring to the team. Maybe you deliver that product or service in a unique way. Whatever that might be, you want to pick one or the other, because if you try to do both, cost and differentiation, it's not going to work. You're going to be bumping into each other. You're going to have conflict within your organization as you're all competing for priorities and the best way forward and how to utilize your resources. So I encourage you to take a step on either side. If you haven't identified that, then that's one of the places you want to start, because it's going to be critically important for you to narrow down and really be successful as you focus on the value that you're offering to your audience. Okay. Now I want to talk about core competencies, right? We're talking about the value that we offer, and we're talking about what's the internal standard of performance that we expect, and what are those strengths that are needed to be able to consistently perform that, right? So core competencies is a set of capabilities that leverage your experience and each individual employee's skills to accomplish the outcomes that produce value for both customers and the organization, right? So have you, in your strategic planning process in the past, really thought about what are we truly capable of? Do we have the talent on our team to be able to accomplish what we're looking to achieve, right? And if you haven't, then that's a great place to be a little more reflective and say, well, if we don't have the right skills and talent currently, is it something that we should pursue? Are we really committed and passionate about this value statement? And if so, what else do we need to make sure that we're successful in delivering it, right? Could take a little bit of an investment on the front side, but it could be very rewarding on the back side once you start providing that value, elevating what you offer to your audience, and then you receive more people interested in that value and purchasing your products or services. And so as you think about not only where you're at today as an organization, and you're thinking forward, what are those core competencies you're going to need to provide the value that you want to provide? So if you just continued to provide the same products and services as you do today, you're just going to continue to be consistent with delivering that to the market. How is technology going to change that as you move forward? How is regulation going to change that? We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. So I kind of gave a little bit of the secret away, but as you think about the impact of that, it's definitely going to change the skills that you're going to need from your employees, and it's also going to change potentially that full set of capabilities that you might or might not have for delivering that value going forward. So here are a couple questions to give thought to. Have you taken a look at your strengths as an organization at the organizational level or at the individual level and really thought about how that connects to what your customer preferences are? Do you know what your customer preferences are? Do you know what your organization's strengths are, right? So as you think about your team or teams, what do they do really well? Where have they maybe fell short recently? And it's not to focus on their weaknesses by any means, but is it something that we need to elevate because it's a critical part of our value statement? Or is it something that, well, maybe we don't need to be doing it anymore, right? And so then those things we're not doing so well, could we carve that off? Could we sunset it? So that way that energy can be focused on the things that we do really well. Have you created efficiencies that no other company has? So you're able to deliver your products and services in a new and unique way, or in a faster way, or more cost-effective way. And how do you leverage technology? Have you found a creative way to leverage a computer system, an application? Do you have something proprietary that you developed to be able to give you that edge to provide a better value, either at a lower cost or in a different way, right? These are questions you should be thinking about, because then when you get to operational and tactical, it's going to influence some of those decisions you'll be making along the way about how do we actually get it done. Here's why we want to do this type of work, and here's what we're hoping to achieve. How are we going to get it done, right? And that comes in structure and processes as we move forward. So do you truly know what your core services and products are? Just because you have focused on a certain product or service in the past doesn't mean you're going to continue to do it in the future. And that's okay. There might be some dissatisfied people, so think about some of the chocolate or candy or things that some of the makers have sunsetted. So Hershey, as an example, you know, if there's some really good candy that I like and they no longer make it, I'm going to be a little upset, but I'm sure they can entice me with something else because I just have a love for chocolate, right? So it's not that we have to lose client base necessarily. We just have to show them something instead, right? So as you think about your core products and services, what do you do consistently and really well? What do you provide that's of a high quality, that has very little rework or very little breakage or very little warranty? What are those things? And can you make them even better? Those are questions for your team to sit and think about and really ask. And then you want to take a look at, are we profitable? Even though we enjoy doing it and we have a fun time doing it, making the product or service, are we really profitable? Because you're going to see in a couple slides why that's important. And I'm not saying it's all about the money. Please don't take what I'm saying as that. But we have to be able to have some profit so we can make some reinvestments, right? So let's go ahead and move forward now and shift to market. But before I do that, I do think a question has come in. So Kaylee, is there anything that we should talk about now before we shift to a slightly different topic here?
So they were just two comments about why people were or were not doing strategic planning. There was one that says no, because there was this thing called COVID, yikes. And another one was, we're careful to keep our 5-year view very high level, just a few metrics describing where we're trying to get by then. We don't bother thinking about plans beyond 3 years, though, as landscape and challenges before us and all companies are constantly evolving. As our planning horizon gets smaller, our operational and tactical plans get more detailed.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I agree with all of that, because there are unknowns that come up and certainly could completely derail a strategic plan that we created 5 years ago, right? So keeping it high level, saying, hey, we'd love to extend into these other geographic regions, or we would like to grow the top line by 50% in 5 years. Those are good broad goals, because then how you get there might be different based upon current circumstances, right? So you might initially look at New York as a place that you want to extend your services, but now with COVID, when most people left New York, you're like, I don't know. I hear a lot of people are moving to Austin. Maybe we should shift our attention there, right? So being nimble and flexible with the things that are happening around us is so important. So I love what that person had shared about, you know, when we get closer, we get more granular, more detailed, tactical, operationally, and so forth. So great advice. Thank you for sharing. All right, let's look at market here. So when you think about your audience and who you want to provide value to, who really truly values that service or product? Is it the people that are currently at top of mind when you think about who that audience is? And maybe you're targeting the right or the wrong audience. So really give a hard look as to who would be interested in what we have to offer, right? So as you think about maybe doing something from a landscape perspective, people who really enjoy brick and mortar city may not appreciate it. However, maybe some people would love having a rooftop little garden that they could tinker with, or seeing beautiful flowers on the top of a rooftop. So who would that audience be, and should we focus on that, and so forth. So there is a client of ours who does focus on making beautiful spaces. Well, what is beautiful space? It could vary, right? My definition of a beautiful space could be different than yours, but at the end of the day, who are the individuals or the group of people or the organizations we're trying to appeal to? And then as you think about that audience, who you think would value your product or service, are their interests changing? And is there something that you have to be forward to thinking that might impact what you do and why you do it, right? Could that impact your value statement? So keeping that on the horizon of who you are hoping to sell your products and services to, who will find value in it, and keeping a pulse on what they have interest in, and is that shifting as they move forward. Now, I'm not trying to bring in too many mushy things here, but you know, some people are very driven by social or emotional needs, right? So just the other week, here I am, I had a broken lawnmower and I had to go shopping for one. That's very emotional because I'm stressed because my grass is growing like crazy. I needed to buy a lawnmower, and so my emotion is driving it, and I probably would have paid any price just to solve that problem, right? Whereas earlier in the season, when it wasn't critical, my emotions weren't playing into that. I was just being thoughtful about, you know, the price and my budget and what I wanted to spend. So I know it's a simplistic example, but we have to give thought to, you know, those that we are selling our products and services to. Do they have social or emotional aspirations or things that are driving their decisions for what they purchase and where they invest their money, time, and energy, right? So depending on what we continue to perceive as value, are they going to receive that as the same value? And are they willing to commit ongoing year over year to share their money, share their time, their effort, and so forth into that value that we're providing? So ask those questions the next time you're sitting around the table and you're thinking about your top 20%, right? Many of you probably have heard of the Pareto rule, where largely 80% of our revenue comes from 20% of our clients or customers, right? So that 20%, really peel that back and take a look at what's the value that they perceive, what are their interests going forward, and what are those social or emotional needs that need to be met for them to continue to want to purchase stuff from you, right? So here's another framework that has been used for so many years, Porter's 5 Forces. You probably have seen it, and it really takes us, or takes a hard look at, you know, our suppliers, who are the buyers in the marketplace? Are there new entrants or new people, innovative companies entering the space in which we compete? And are there threats of substitutes? Are people willing to buy something instead because of the cost, or because it offers something different than what consistently they have received from us? So within that, you know, that is the rivalry that we face day in and day out with our businesses. And so this framework can still be relied on. So as you think about that prior slide, and we were talking about just the perceived value and the value that's received, also give thought to, hey, who else is out there that could be passionate about providing the same value, maybe find a faster way to do it different, etc. So knowing out there in our peripheral vision, you know, who else should we be worried about? Not that we should look to necessarily compete, but we want to make sure that we're keeping pace with what our desires and goals are, and that we continue to be able to be successful and hopefully have the competitive advantage. All right, now I'm going to talk about anticipatory thinking. For many of you who have followed us over the past couple years, you know the journey that we have been on. We have really embraced this way of thinking, not only for today, but going forward. And for many of you who are on our email list, if you have us blocked, then let me know because you missed a very important announcement yesterday. We are actually on September 8th going to have Daniel Burrus available for all of you. And we're going to do that through a webinar platform just like this. And it's something you don't want to miss. So not only has he written this book that's up here on the screen, he has been, a great partner for us as we continue down this journey, but then he's written other books and has done presentations all over the world. And he is really a neat mind and somebody that you want to have the opportunity to meet and see and be part of his audience as he shares some things with us and our audience about not only today, 2022, but 2023 and beyond. So as you're thinking about your strategy, I hinted a little bit about technology and regulation. So when you're thinking about the value that you're going to provide, what's coming next in 2022 and 2023? As you think about, the demographics shifting in our organization, older ones leaving, younger ones coming in, as you think about the different technologies that are pressing into our organizations like Microsoft products or, different types of engineering drawing products and things like that, how's that going to impact the value that we offer? And then from a regulation or regulatory standpoint, are there things that might put pressure on that value that we offer? And are there things that we're going to have to adjust and conform to as we move forward? And I can't get too granular here unless somebody wants to share out an example in the Q&A about, what are some of those specific examples that we should be worried about? We don't have enough time to really dig into that today, but it's something that I want you to be thinking about. And then how do we develop opportunities within that? Somebody a couple years ago had shared with me, hey, don't let a disruption be an opportunity that you wasted, right? So there's opportunity sometimes even in the negative things. And so knowing what's ahead and thinking forward, knowing some of those things that will absolutely impact our organizations, the shifting of the generations, the technology, the regulation, what can we be doing now to be prepared for that or to be ahead of our competition? That's truly how we shape the future, and that's how we accelerate the success. And Daniel Burrus talks about all of that within his book and his different sessions and so forth. And so weaving that as part of the mindset in the conversations that you have about the value that you provide to the markets that you provide it to, it will be a completely different experience. So that's where I challenge you to think about who in the organization has led your strategic planning process in the past, and will they be able to give you that new mindset? Will they be able to layer on some of these new and different things to give you that advantage going forward? So we've already spent time talking about this, so I'm going to move to the next slide here, in that when you are able to be more proactive and anticipatory, that's when you have the greatest chance of being able to execute your strategy, right? You're going to have more clarity, you're going to be able to have more laser-focused priorities and really have the opportunity to edge ahead of your competition. So most companies are still trying to react in the day-to-day. They've been disrupted, they're just trying to get their footing again, or they're not looking further out and they're just in the here and the now, have their heads down within the project work or trying to get products out the door and so forth. And by not looking up and anticipating what's coming next, that's where you're going to fall short on your strategic planning. And that's where potentially it's not going to be as successful as it could be. And in many cases, that's where it ends up on that bookshelf that we talked about before. So let's go ahead and jump into our third poll question here. I want to talk about your leadership team. Are they truly aligned with the future direction of your firm? Yes, no, or unsure? There could be some things that impact this, right? If you've had key leadership turnover, people retiring, or just naturally some choosing to go in a different direction. Maybe you have an ownership change. these are things that, could definitely impact this. So I'm anxious to hear what your thoughts are and responses are. And once we get to 85, we'll go ahead and share this out.
Christy, I have a comment in here that says the biggest challenge will be automation in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And so while we're waiting for everybody to respond here, I'll share just a little bit of an experience I had. With automation, initially, we were all afraid of robots taking our jobs, right? Well, that's not going to happen. Yes, robots are going to make things easier. So physically, it's not as burdensome, maybe, or it'll help us create efficiencies that aren't possible if we manually do something. But it will create other opportunities. It'll be new and different work, and that's where it's exciting. So if we can uncover those new and different things, that's where you develop those opportunities that I hinted at. So that was a great example. I'm glad that the participants shared that, because yes, automation will continue. Technology is a critical part of that. However, I don't want people to be fearful of it. All right, Kaylee, let's go ahead and share it out. And I'm so excited. Many of you said that, yes, your leadership team is aligned with the future direction of the firm. So these conversations will be really easy for you, especially if you're all on the same page. For those where you're not aligned, well, let's talk about why is that? Is it because we're all fighting for a different purpose, the reason we want to do business? Or is it because we're just all unclear about the value we want to provide in the market in which we want to serve? So those would be some real quick questions that maybe could help you figure out, how do we get all on the same page? And if you're just not sure, maybe you're not in a role that has been part of the strategic conversation. So you definitely could ask your team and be curious, and hopefully you can get the answer to be yes. That would be great. So thank you, Kaylee, for sharing that. We got a couple more slides here, and then I definitely want to open it up for more questions or conversations. I certainly don't need to be the only one talking here today. So earlier I hinted about that profitability and the reinvestment, and I don't want any organization to solely be focused on the profits, because I think that's a disservice. It's important, but we have to first think about the people, right? We have to be able to provide an organizational experience for our people where we're successful, they will have continued employment, they're excited about the work that they're doing, and so that way we can keep people, right? And part of that is identifying, how do we help our employees grow and develop? You can do that through mentoring and coaching. You can do that through shadowing. You can also do that by taking some of those profits and investing in tools, classes, courses, etc., to really help employees reinvest in themselves by growing not only personally but professionally. When employees have the opportunity to continue to learn and grow, that's when they stay with an organization. They see opportunity, they see possibility to learn new and different things, work on more challenging or complex projects or initiatives, etc. That's where you stay engaged, because you're still growing and developing. And that's the key, right? It's not about the pizza parties. It's not about the bonuses necessarily. Certainly we want to reward people for going above and beyond, but when people can truly feel that the organization is headed in the right direction, we're providing something of value, people are excited to continue to buy our products and services, now we as employees can get excited, because we'll see that return on that investment, and we'll see that, hey, the organization is excited about all of us having a great path forward. And so that can be really encouraging to people of all ages. It doesn't necessarily have to be just a certain demographic or certain age group that would be excited about that, because I think everybody at the end of the day doesn't want to grow stale, right? I don't know, maybe some do, but the majority I don't think do. So when we think about those profits that we're able to bring back to the organization, because we're focusing on the best use of our time, leveraging our resources in the most efficient way, and we're not focusing on some of those services that, while they are good and they have great intentions, they just aren't really the best place for us to invest our time. When we are able to create that profit, now we can think about, okay, those core services that we offer, how do we take our capabilities and really juice that up? How do we enhance those products? How do we elevate the services we provide? Are there similar products and services that align with the core of what we do that we can now begin offering out to our customers and clients that are at a higher value? You know, as you think about a growth strategy, you have to have profits sometimes to invest in the organization to hit those growth objectives. So whether you have to add talent to your bench, right? Bring more people in that can help continue to grow the organization, or if you are needing to lean on technology more, because that's a critical part of what you do. It ties into that automation. We might have to make some significant investment knowing that that's going to help us provide better value and ultimately, hopefully, bring back those profits to the organization that we need. All of this, when it's pulled together, leads us to the culture, right? So as we think about where we want to go and how are we going to get there, we have to make sure that the behaviors of our team are aligned in a way that's going to help us be successful, right? So as you think about the core values of our organization, we have to make sure that our purpose is aligned with that and what we're pursuing aligns with that, the value we offer and the customers and clients that we're serving. All that pulled together is going to allow us to attract those individuals who intrinsically have similar values and are motivated in a similar way naturally, that will just create that energy and that culture that will help take us into the future more quickly. And one of the things that we should be giving thought to is the leadership team. Leadership has been through torture the past couple of years, right? There was major disruption and many leaders have never faced anything like that before. So as you think forward and you think about the direction that you're headed, do you have a team that is anticipatory or can learn how to be anticipatory like we did here at Stan Boness and have the ability to think strategically? You need that as part of your leadership team. You need people, and it could be some are naturally great at it, others who have to work a little harder, but still are open-minded and can do that, because those individuals, no matter what you're pursuing, are going to have to help lead through any change that you make, right? They have to handle it not only themselves, but then be a resource, a mentor, and a coach to the teams that report into them. And it's not easy all the time. It's really not. But they have to be willing to fail sometimes or be willing to be reflective and continually be flexible and adjust along the way. Does your leadership team truly have an interest in mentoring and coaching? That's so critical to that employee retention piece that I spoke about, because the leadership team holds key insights that allow them to make critical decisions, hard decisions, allow them to solve problems, sometimes that are very complex, and they have to be able to share that forward. So that way the organization doesn't lose that as people begin to retire and so forth. And then does your leadership team do a really good job of communicating and collaborating? It's so important to be able to do that as a team. And if you can't, then you're going to hit roadblocks, and it definitely is going to pull away from you actually being able to pursue your strategy and actually effectively work through that strategic planning process as you think about, okay, here's the value we're going to provide, and here are the markets we're going to provide that value to. How are we actually going to get it done? And what are those more granular steps to, the person's comments earlier about how we're actually going to execute and implement on those things. So my hope is that today you have taken at least one thing that you can go back to your team and just start having different types of conversations. I know this presentation wasn't tactical in nature, but that's because some of these higher level questions have to be answered first, because it's directly going to impact what you do next and how you move forward. So if I were to answer, where do I start? Make sure that these key questions have been answered. If they haven't, start there, because then naturally you're going to know those next steps that need to be taken. So questions that'll have to be answered, decisions that'll have to be made, or tactically the things that we have to put in place to be able to follow through on all of that. You'll start to see that flow out in your strategic planning process then as you move forward. So let me open it up. I did allow 10 minutes here today to see if we have any other questions because we didn't get a ton of them throughout. Kaylee, is there anything that came in?
There's no questions, but there's some good comments in here. So I'll just read a few of them and let you comment on them. So
Yeah.
someone else's biggest challenge, as we spoke about automation in the future, their biggest challenge is keeping and hiring employees.
Yeah. Yep. So keeping employees, I would be interested to know of the top talent that you have. So let's apply the Pareto principle to this as well. So the top 20% of people in your organization that provide the best results for you, perform at the highest level. You probably could rattle off the names right now, right? Talk to them. Why do they stay with your organization? Because that probably is a great thing that you should send out as a communication to the rest of your team. So let's just use an example. Well, I have the opportunity to work with this key mentor and they share great wisdom and so forth. So I would let everybody know, hey, we offer the ability to gain insights from key mentors in our industry and so forth. And so being able to share back all the things that you do really well, or if that top 20% are saying, hey, we're worried about X, Y, and Z, then maybe spend a little bit of time and figure out, okay, how do we take that worry away? So retaining people, it's, I know compensation is a big part of the conversation here lately, but it's not the critical piece. Retention is because people feel like they have the opportunity to continue to learn and grow. Intrinsically, they are motivated by similar things and just feel successful. Have the ability to play to their strengths and really do meaningful work and get excited about maybe challenges and different types of work. And then from a recruiting standpoint, very similar, making sure we're telling people what we offer as an organization and really understanding who are we hiring, the type of position, maybe the generation that they're currently in, and what are they currently most interested in? How can we speak their language and tell them what we offer for those things they're most interested in? Kaylee, what's next?
All right, so another good comment is our leadership is largely aligned, but are they really prepared to lead?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, and without knowing more, I guess I'd have to evaluate what are the skills they currently have. Are there things that we talked about today that we could enhance their knowledge or experience and really peel that back to see if they have what it takes to roll up their sleeves and make it happen? I definitely would need to know more.
All right, there's no questions still, just a few other comments here. So the next one is, we were not previously aligned, but made the very difficult decision to part ways with one of our senior leaders that was just not able to get on the same page as the rest of the leadership team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate sometimes. And it's not that, there was a failure in any way. Maybe it's just no longer the right fit for that person in the role. It's so important to have the right person in a role. And, initially maybe it was the right fit, but over time something shifted and that person just has different interests or the organization has gone down a different path. And so, yeah, that inevitably happens sometimes. And I have to imagine that probably with that person moving along, you saw an uptick now, maybe just morale and engagement because people now have maybe a different leader, somebody who is more aligned that can really create that energy that might not have been there when somebody wasn't aligned.
All right, let me see if there's any new questions that came in. If not, we have just a few more moments here just to get a few thoughts out into the world. All right. Says, again, for the future strategy, we know our customers are finding it hard to find skilled labor. So as a supplier to these customers, we must have a strategy to simplify our product and services to make it easier for our customers.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that because we had a conversation earlier today internally, whereas, with the shortage of talent or the people interested in the certain skills that are needed, we as organizations might have to make some hard decisions about the products and services we offer. So we might not have a choice but to discontinue something, because if we can't get the talent that is working in that space might just have to be shifted to focusing on something else. So yeah, there could be some hard decisions coming forward for companies.
We did have a question come in. So the question is, any tips for someone that is new to leadership within the company?
Yes, seek to understand. So that has always been a good technique, is just ask a lot of questions. Try to understand the history and the perspectives of the current leadership team, so that way you understand, why have we done what we have done? You'll be better positioned then if you have ideas and suggestions to do it differently. You can then weave that in and have a good perspective as to why things were done the way that they were. So yeah, just learn as much as you can, ask a lot of questions, learn everything about the organization that you can, and not just focus on your specific area, but focus on what does the business as a whole focus on. So then you can truly understand the points of view of different areas in the organization.
Alrighty, we have another question that came in. It says, what is the best way to get your leadership aligned on remote work? In a candidate market like today's, often the ideal candidate isn't available in the location you would want them. The old school thought that dictates if you're not here, you're not working, still is here.
Yeah. So one question I would ask those who are resistant to it, and I understand going fully remote might not be an option for certain professions, especially if you have to have hands-on collaboration, but ask them, what would make you comfortable to know that the quality and quantity of work would still be there if somebody just worked in a different place? So giving them the reassurance that, hey, people can be effective and they're not just going to be taking naps all day, that is going to give them peace of mind and comfort that, hey, I can trust this person. Because at the end of the day, it's about trust. And people entering the organization, maybe they have to earn that trust. Some people will give the trust automatically up front until you jeopardize that. Others, you have to earn it. So knowing the executives who are resisting it, maybe it's that trust piece that we have to overcome first and get them maybe a little more open-minded by providing a way, a tool, or something to give them the comfort that, hey, this person is truly producing what we expect them to produce.
All right, and looks like we just have one more question in the hopper here. Let me scroll to it. It says, I understand developing your employees. How do you handle finding the right people, because the cost to educate and provide growth is costly and current labor force is not necessarily the best?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to first understand, what skills do you need? A lot of companies have not updated their job descriptions recently. So looking at the position description or job description, identifying what is it that we truly need. And I can teach people a lot of things, but I can't teach them some of those intangible skills. So that's what I'd really be looking for: critical thinking ability, decision making, managing time, organization, those different things I would focus on, because then I can maybe teach some of the more technical. And it really is looking in different and unique places, not limiting yourself to a specific place to search for the talent because you've always just gone there, but maybe there's other similar places that you can look for talent and really uncover somebody who has all the passions and the skill sets that are intangible, that then you could teach them the way. I know it's a huge investment, but if you find the right person who intrinsically is motivated by similar things, I think you'll see that their energy and excitement towards that growth and development will shave off some of those costs. I really do. I think naturally they would just be so inquisitive that you would be excited with that return on that investment. I know it's a diamond. That's why I don't rush to hire, but take your time if you can to really find that right fit, that right person.
Alrighty, and it looks like we don't have any more questions, so that's actually perfect timing. If you do think of a question that you would like Christy to give her feedback on, please drop it in the survey. And with that, Christy, any closing remarks?
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you spending the past hour with me. And as always, feel free to reach out if there's any follow-up questions or comments. Thank you.